after that, it's going to be open to anyone to ask questions. So if you want to ask a question, just put your hand up, or you can type something in the chat, and we'll try and get through as many people as possible. So try and keep things quick. But yes, I think just to jump straight into it, Katie, could you please explain why the university has made the decision to close the Barron, and what's the plan for that space?
Yes, okay, yeah, I'm very happy to speak to that. Let me just, my mouse, I just had a slight panicked moment where my cat's trying to escape from the room I'm in, so I was trying to open a door and do this, so I apologise that I've lost my screen temporarily. Thanks very much for coming. It's actually a delight to be invited to talk to you today, because this is something we've been working on since late last year, and we hadn't yet had the opportunity to make any announcements to the student body or to anybody beyond the working groups who've been working on things. And we hadn't really had the time to put together the information for you. So this meeting gives us the opportunity to talk you through some of the issues which we are facing, and some of the plans that we've put in place, and also the opportunity to hear from you in case we haven't thought of something or you want us to try and work out a different issue as well. So I'm going to explain a little bit about why we're in the position where we're not going to reopen the Barron Theatre, and what we're going to do to make sure that student theatre is supported at St Andrews. So as part of a wider review of our operations, the whole university operations, which were brought about by lockdown, and through the process of adjusting our entire estate to be COVID safe, the university and members of the senior management team have been undertaking reviews of lots of areas of our operation, and this has included our performing arts and our cultural provision more broadly. And so this is really an opportune moment to do this, because particularly for the performing arts, there's been a complete and a blanket ban on any performance art in Scotland since March of last year. And our performing arts venues have been, for the most part, closed. And the Barron Theatre was able to briefly open and screen cinema, but hasn't been able to do anything more than that for nearly a year. So this means that any planned activities have been cancelled, or programs have been scrapped for the foreseeable future. But what that's allowed is, and it's given us a little bit of time to think, to plan strategically for how we as a university return to a post-COVID normal with a more resilient and a better supported way of working. And I'm not sure, it's in effect the Build Back Better concept, although I don't personally love the phrasing. It's the same idea. So over the last few years, the university has invested very heavily in the infrastructure for performing arts and culture here. We have new buildings, we have refurbished, and quite substantial refurbishments have taken place with new furnitures and so on. We have new staff, and we've also allocated a lot more funding to these areas as well. And we've been delivering on a strategy to increase student engagement with the opportunities that wider cultural environment that we're developing, and what that brings, to ensure that the aspects of the student experience which benefit students most are retained. So when we reviewed the performing arts provision in the round, we of course reviewed the Barron Theatre. Now this building is leased by the Students' Association from the university, and the Students' Association has devolved its operations to a group of student volunteers known as the Barron Theatre Committee, a committee of mermaids, itself a subcommittee of the Students' Association. All the parties in that listing, as well as the university, have known for quite some time that there are substantial issues with the building in its current condition. And this has been a long cause for concern for the Students' Association, who run a considerable risk in the way that the building is operated, and what are known issues with the building being not fit for purpose. As such, the university proposed a solution to retain the essence of the Barron Theatre, its creativity, its autonomy, opportunity for students to cut their teeth in all aspects of theatre production and management, but with the benefits of doing so within a fit for purpose and a compliant space. So the plan is now for the Barron residency at the Baya, and this was born when we started the review. And we've been working behind the scenes to put in place some flesh on the details to ensure that what we progress forward with the Barron Theatre is a genuine partnership between students and the professionals there, and retains what makes the Barron special and independent. We had hoped to make an announcement of these plans once we had more details in place, but events rather overtook us this week with news of concerns and responses to the Barron not reopening post-COVID being made more widely available. But without understanding the problems with the Barron and why this is not desirable for students and the university more broadly. The university has long had tentative plans to convert the North Street site into a student-focused one-stop shop and a development of the library precinct and learning commons areas, effectively study space and student services. And we know that study space is a continuing and really prominent demand for students. And we need to invest as a university in these areas of priority for our whole student community. The Barron Theatre is located in some of the buildings that these plans are considering, and so it was highly likely that at some point in the near future that we would close that building. So this makes the level of investment needed to bring the Barron Theatre up to scratch as a fit-for-purpose compliant operation, both beyond the financial capacity of the Students' Association and really very poor value for money in the wider context of what makes the university's plans for that area. So while the Barron remains closed due to COVID, it made sense to us to use this time to prevent what would be otherwise very disruptive to theatre when programs are in full flow, and instead set up the Barron now while things were more quiet in its new home at a very careful and planned pace. So our plan is that by the end of this semester, the Barron Theatre will be returned to the university, and from September 2021, the new Barron will open with its Freshers' Week extravaganza from its new home at the Baya. There are lots of operational matters that are still to discuss between the Students' Association, the Barron and the Baya, and we think that we've thought of everything we need to address in those meetings to come, but we would welcome the opportunity now to hear from those who are involved in student theatre now at St Andrews, and for you to represent to us what you value most about your experience so that we can try to make accommodation for these in our planning over the next few months. So I'm very open to hearing everything you have to say, and we'll try as much as we can to take notes and make sure that those views are represented in the discussions that the Barron Committee are having with us going forward. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Katie. I think kind of you touched on it briefly, like the plan now is to move towards the Baya. So Callie and Jess, could you please explain to me what the university is offering as an alternative for the Barron and all the other theatre and student activities that usually take place in that building?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. We were reminded yesterday that when we applied for this job, we gave a presentation, and in that presentation, one of the things we really wanted to do was take the Lawrence Levy Studio, which is an 80-seat purpose-built theatre space, and turn it back into what was always intended to be, which was a rehearsal and performance space, because we've inherited something that's been going on for a while, which is it is often used for meetings and events and things other than theatre. So when this proposal came to us late last year, we were really pleased at the idea of having young creative people working in theatre in the building. So the first thing we want to say is that we feel really good about welcoming the students, the Barron, into the Baya. The other thing to say up front, which Katie touched on, is that we really want the Barron Theatre to continue to function as it does, with autonomy. They would still be deciding what they do, how they do it, being autonomous, keeping their sense of their own identity, doing their own marketing, their own ticketing, their own technical, their own choice of rep, whatever kind of theatre that is. We want you to hang on to that. We have no desire to interfere with that. There would be some nuts and bolts around health and safety, but that's really all. And if the Barron students want support from the buyer in whatever way that is, then we're there to provide that. But again, from a hands-off, you get on with what you're doing the way you always have. So what we're able to offer is as much time as possible in that studio space, There is also the 4th level foyer. There's a storage space up there, 2 dressing rooms. Would be access to our big series store. What have I left out? That's about it. Yeah. There are a few things to work out. We know there are a few things to work out with things that we have ongoing commitments to that we need to hang on to. But we think we're going to be able to give, you know, a resident a new home for the Barron for a really good amount of that time.
Thanks very much. Okay, I can see some questions that are popping up in the chat. There's a couple that have been brought to me by the Mermaids Committee, so I'll just let them ask them first, and then we'll move on to the questions in the chat. And anyone else, if you want to have a question as well, just you can put your hand up too. So first off, Kate.
Yes, hi. So I'm Kate Hamlin. I'm the current Barron manager.
Hi.
I would first just like to highlight that it's been a whole couple of weeks for the Barron, I think. I personally have only known about these plans for less than 2 weeks. So I think I've just been kind of doing a lot of like thinking and brainstorming about the things that this will mean for the Barron and for mermaids more widely. So I have a couple of questions on that. First, I love mermaids from the bottom of my heart, absolutely. But the Barron is more than just a space for mermaids. So I would like to know what provisions have been made for the countless societies and other student groups that use the venue all day, every day for most of the semester.
So I'll take that question. What the next steps are is that we are going to move to the operational planning for this. So at the moment, this is that we've agreed a principal framework. So these are the next steps. So we need to go through with you and work out who needs what and when. We need to know which society needs what the commitments that you've made to them are. Can we deliver on that? And if not, what we can do to mitigate that. So can we offer alternative spaces or something else that we can do? So we will have solutions to all of those concerns. We don't have the detail on that yet because you haven't yet met with us to tell us. But what we have got is time. There's plenty of time, particularly during the lockdown period where there's certainly no access to the building, let alone in a kind of phased return post-lockdown. So what we can do is make sure that we get that absolutely right, and we will be working very closely with you to make sure that those needs are represented in whatever the shape of the plans may be.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 more questions. The second one is, how will the spaces for learning about set construction, costuming, and lighting and sound design be converted to this new space?
I might hand that directly to Jess Richards.
Hi. We've yet to have the even initial conversations about what you are used to having, and therefore what equipment you might want to bring into the BioStudio space. That's all still to be decided, but we don't have any expectations that we'll be involved in any of that teaching, apart from to make sure that people are competent to use the equipment that they're using in the building. Nobody's going to blow the building up. So I think it's up to further discussion about what training can continue. What we can't offer, and I know has been raised as an issue, is a workshop space, because we don't have one in the theatre. So I think that's something we still need to solve.
Sorry, Kate, can I just interject? I see some questions about why you haven't been part of the discussions until the inter-semester break, and they're slightly accusatory, and I will note that I don't think that's appropriate. Kate hasn't been involved in the discussions as a deliberate decision by the higher level people who are involved in the discussions in the Students' Association, because we were discussing this over the exam period, and it was thought and felt that the biggest priority for students at the university during the exam period was to concentrate on their exams. And that's why we're working on this in the inter-semester period. There is equally, from next week, we'll have to work at a different pace because people are back in classes. So can I be clear, Kate has not been excluded, and I would like the comment noted in there that says that she has not. It was just exam period.
I think just to make clear as well that we also haven't been having any, there have been no, we're at the very, very early stages. We've had a couple of discussions with Gavin and Martin just at this point, this very early. This is the broad brushstroke what's going to happen, but there hasn't been any of that. The negotiating that happens next and discussion about what the students would like and how we can best go about this haven't happened yet. And that will be happening with all the involvement of the students. And we can't say enough how much we really, really want to make this work for you. We are absolutely looking to make this as good as it can be for you. And we hope that will be fantastic. We're really looking forward to having you.
Sorry, Gavin, I can see some other comments coming in that I can just answer straight away and stop people worrying about, which I'll do. I see Catherine Noonan. Hello, Catherine. You have suggested that you'll put in an FOI request about the finances for the buyer. I'll just be completely honest with you. I can tell you exactly the university invests just over £1 million every year in the buyer. So that should answer that question. You can request the accounts. They're publicly available. They're in our court minutes. They're in our park minutes. You can probably find them online. You don't even need to FOI request it, but it's over $1 million a year.
Thanks for that. Kate, did you have another question that you wanted to ask?
Yes, sorry. So my third question is a little bit more specific, but I was wondering, I know that there's been a lot of discussion about how the Mermaids assets are going to be translated to this new space, and the offer to store things in the facility out in Surrey is very, very generous. And I'm sure there will be other questions about the logistics of that. But more specifically, I think, is there have been significant investments made from the Barron Fund in the last couple of years, most notably a new floor and a new seating rack during my time at university. And obviously the floor can't exactly be moved, but I know that there has been discussion of moving the seating rack. So I just wanted to clarify, has there been confirmation that the seating rack would fit in the space? And if not, who would be financially responsible for acquiring one?
Do you want to answer that, Jess?
We haven't had that conversation yet, so I don't have any information about the seating rack or any of the assets that are in the Barron, pardon me.
But yes, but in principle, then your assets would move across if that's what you desired.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You can understand we haven't been able to, nobody's been able to look at anybody's spaces or assess what there is. It's been very difficult, but you know, everything you own will be transferred, and you'll still own it. So, yeah.
I think just kind of expanding on that, talking about the buyer fund, because I know there's some mentions of it in the comments as well. Could you please explain what the plan is going forward for the buyer for the Barron Fund? Sorry.
It's difficult.
One of the I don't want to be glib, but there is a very attractive. I'm quite fond of the alliteration and the alliterative potential of the buyer and the Barron, but that's not a serious point, I should add. So on the point of the Barron Fund is sits with development at the moment and is intended for the practical support of the practical drama and not academic drama at the university. We are working, it hasn't had much drawn down on it at all since it was founded. It has been very significantly underspent, in part because the Students' Association has borne the costs of running the Barron, and it hasn't been required for the Barron, and it hasn't been used by the buyer. We see no reason and are working towards a system where we will use that money to support student drama as appropriate and within the confines and appropriate governance measures of the legacy as it stands. So that money will be supported and looked at by probably the current committee who look after it, and with a little bit more governance around it, but it's intended and will continue to be intended to support student theatre in its practical sense. So if you have any ideas, you just apply to the fund. It's very straightforward.
As the chair of the current committee, can I come in here, please?
Yes, of course. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Katie. There's something, just before we go any further, there are one or two things that are disturbing me slightly here. Allowing for the fact that we are in a situation where we're closed down and we can't wander in and out of buildings, we still have a significant idea of what material we have, and I feel rather sorry for the buyer managers that they have been not given any idea of what material may or may not end up in their space. I am greatly disturbed that a workshop will be lost. The Barron Fund has been spent, we don't spend capital, we spend interest, just in case the students aren't aware of that. The interest that we spend, and there's now quite a lot of money because we haven't spent anything since the floor was put in. The way that the Student Drama Advisory Group, which I chair and which Julia Prest is also on, and Julia is here somewhere, that group, that advisory group is responsible for hearing requests for funding. And as chair of that group, I pushed hard under Ollie Savage for the implementation of the seating rack, and then under the next Barron manager for the floor. The next proposal was to review the most unsafe place in the whole building, which is the control desk, and to remove it from where it is to somewhere safer, to bring in high tech, because the Barron Fund could accommodate this easily, to bring in high tech lighting, controlling, and to keep that space for the students. Another issue which has been raised here and which has been going up and down the screen here is the extent to which as much time as possible. What does that mean? The Barron space is entirely available to the students. There's the Bar Junior Theatre. There's the question of what happens if the bar is closed when the Barron could have been open. These are considerable issues. The next issue I wish to raise, and the very first question I posted at the very top of this chat, is were there any students, apparently members of the Students' Association have been involved in these discussions. Why none of the members of the Mermaids were involved is a serious question. The next issue I have is why these negotiations have been going on in an exam period when most of us didn't actually set exams. Most of the university was working on continuous assessment. I know personally, I know where this is coming from. I know which member of senior management is behind all this. I don't accept the fact that trying to turn it into a space for, turning the Barron into a space for a wee bit more study space is acceptable, because it's not that if you, as of the moment that you put more offices in there, there's no study space. There's another issue here, which is the Anthony Tudor Fund, which has been closed down to all intents and purposes by development over issues of insurance, etc., etc., etc. The major issue I have as chair of the Student Drama Advisory Group at the moment, and I know you and I are supposed to have a meeting about this on Monday, Katie, but we just happen to be here right now. One of the major issues I have here, and I am fully behind the students. I want to make that clear to all of the students listening to this. Unless the students are 100% behind this and can be guaranteed that they will have all of the facilities at the bar that they currently have, they will have all of the possibilities at the bar that they currently have in the Barron, and that they have the space. And I mean, I know that the Barron has its limitations. We all know that. But the Barron Fund is there and has been trying to improve the Barron, I beg your pardon, gradually. We haven't been able to meet, we haven't been able to discuss, we haven't been able to sit down and talk about our plans for the Barron. And as member of the student, as the chair of the Student Drama Advisory Group, I found out about this yesterday. Okay? I'd like that to sink in with the students. I found out about this yesterday. And I do not appreciate the fact that we were sidelined. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Can I respond to that? And then I think there might be some elements that the Callie and Jess might like to pick up, and I suspect some students might want to come in. The first on the issue of the funding and the Anthony Tudor Fund and the Barron Fund. I can reassure students that Joe and I are speaking next week with several other people. We have got all of the required details on the legacies and the bequests, but these funds have been underspent for a long time. Some of that is because of the way when the Barron Theatre was constructed and put into the Students' Association, it limited the ability to spend some of the funds. So there's additional funding beyond just these two, which is sitting there unable to be spent. So we are going to try and make sure that all of that funding can be spent with the appropriate application processes, with the money available to students to develop however you want. Some of them are very restricted, some of them are less restricted, but we will make sure that that money comes out to you in the best possible way. Now, the infrastructure for that already exists in many ways, and Joe's committee delivers a lot of good work. We have no intention of changing that. We're just trying to make sure that that money is made available through the complications of finance and the different liabilities that different organisations, and the Students' Association is separate from the university, so the different things that they have. So we are trying very, very hard to make sure that stays and is actually benefits students even more. And so kind of rest assured that Joe and I are talking on this week, I didn't know it was Monday, but yes, this week, about it, and we will start to put in place that. On the second point, more broadly, that you made about the capital plan, which is the longer term estate plan for the university. That building is not necessarily going to become study space, and I think it's important for that to be understood. It is part of a plan that is designed to increase study space across the entire precinct. It will increase student service space. There will be a major capital refurbishment of that. As yet, it's impossible to say what that will look like because it has not yet gone through the formal space and asset management improvement process. It hasn't been through design. It's had some preliminary thought put to it by the estate's master plan, but it hasn't been thought through. So the sort of tentative element to that is, and why I can't say exactly what the building is going to be used for is because we don't yet fully know, because it hasn't been through all of the construction stages to get a design, to get a concept, to get a price, to get all the things that we need to do. But what we do know is that that precinct needs investment to make it better for the student experience. And we know that there are elements of that which are required for modern study. Some of the Butts Wind work that's going on and will be taking place over the next couple of years is laying the first foundation for that work, which will take place. So the capital plan is still very much in progress at that site, but what the kind of closed nature of the building at the moment has enabled is a conversation about what we do when it reopens. Do we invest in it now? Or do we say actually spending what could be £500,000 on that building, or do we wait when we need to do something else with it? So there's lots of questions about the order and the priorities in the longer term vis-a-vis the short term. And so that's where the kind of logical outcome of that is saying, well, actually we can give students something really amazing in a fit for purpose space that we already own. So what does that look like? So that's where we're at. You've made some points about, you've noted that there are unsafe places in the building, and I think this is part of the driver, for certainly from the board of the Students' Association are concerned about that, and the university is very concerned about that, because we have obligations to our students to ensure that they're working in areas which are health and safety compliant, and that is a high priority for us. This is particularly exacerbated and re-emphasised in importance during the period which is going to face us when the building reopens in the coronavirus context. So hygiene protocols, all the risk assessments need to be done to enable the space to be workable in the post-COVID context. And that does also have significant implications for the way that the space operates. That's already been done at the Bayer, and we already know what the constraints are there, so we can confidently enable student theatre in the post-coronavirus context in the way that we don't know yet what that would look like in the Barron space. I think I've covered your main points. The workshop you mentioned, yes, this is a known area for discussion. We are hearing about some of the elements that are required, and that is going to be looked at very, very carefully across the next semester so that something appropriate and suitable is in place for students as soon as September starts. So I think that's all of those elements addressed.
If I may come back, please,
Yes,
Gavin.
of course.
Go ahead.
Addressed, possibly. Answered, I don't think so. Right.
Well, can I just say, Joe, I'm very happy for you to be involved in any of the discussions going forward, and you can be included in all of the groups that look at the nuts and bolts of what we do. So you are more than welcome to contribute at a granular level in these discussions.
With respect, Katie, I allowed you to finish what you were going to say.
Sorry, I didn't realise you hadn't finished. I apologise.
I hadn't started. Where the alleged underspend is concerned, in no small part that's because we were moving forward very carefully and very slowly and cautiously. For the information of everyone here, this is not a secret. There is currently there's well over £100,000 worth to spend in the Barron Fund. Right? Now that could quite easily address the majority of the issues that we have in the Barron Theatre. Right? I still don't have an answer to what is as much as possible. The students have complete and total and controlled access to the Barron. That has not been addressed, because if they go into the bar and they don't have that level of access, then the students are being disadvantaged. They are having something taken away from them. Right? Until I get concrete answers as to why we cannot use the money in the Barron Fund at the moment to keep the students in their space, which they have, it was renamed the Barron Theatre. Let's not forget that. Right? And thank you for your message, John. The points here are that, along with a good many other people here present, the fact that this has been sprung more or less on us, right, leaves a rather bitter taste. And on the principle that to say that, that money wasn't spent, it hasn't been possible to spend that money.
That's understood, and there is no criticism being levied against the way that fund has been managed at all. That is not what I am suggesting, nor what the university is suggesting. It's not the case at all. On the point about the timing, yes, it feels to you and to everybody here that it's been a fast decision. It hasn't been as fast for us, but we hadn't yet, and I hasten to add, we hadn't yet got to the point that we had something to share, because we are still working through all of the details. And this meeting and the sort of more public discussion of these matters was raised in public and not directly with us. So actually we were having, the point that we discovered that there was public conversation about this, we were in a meeting, the buyer, myself, the sabbatical officers and Mermaids Committee were in a meeting talking about the schedule of the meetings that we were yet to have to determine all the elements of this before we went to talk to the broader community about it. So it seems sudden to you because we weren't yet ready to talk about the detail. And that's why we're not being cagey, and Callie and Jess may come in and offer some more flesh on this, but we're not being cagey at all about what as much time as possible means. It's that we haven't yet had the opportunity to sit down with the Barron Committee, with the student groups who use it, and to say, what is it that you really need? What is really important? We've got a sense of that and we have a rough outline of that, but we can't commit to it publicly and confirm that until we've had those conversations.
I accept that. Sorry, I'm just going to hog this conversation for a little bit more, because there is a fundamental issue here. And that fundamental issue is that certain, what do you call them? Key players, certain major interest and shareholders in this whole enterprise haven't been consulted. Somebody has made the comment on the chat here that this feels very much like a fait accompli. That any discussions that we have going forward are damage limitation, and that the university has acted dare I say, without consideration, without due consideration of what the students might actually think. Right? Now, I'm hogging this. I'm going to shut up.
Well, I would say I take the point, and that you're concerned about consultation and about student involvement in the decision making, and I can certainly reflect that I think wider consultation. Yes, we haven't talked extensively about it with the student body yet. However, there has been significant mermaids and student association conversations around this from the outset. And I think the students who have been involved in that are in the best place to express whether or not they feel that they have been consulted and had agency in the discussions that we've had going forward.
Okay.
I'd like to say thanks very much for all the points you've raised, Joe. I think although we have been consulted on this general negotiation and process, from the Students' Association, we were very much told that the Barron was going to close, and we weren't given any thought in that. So there has been a lot of conversations, and there's conversations ongoing about what to do with the buyer. But we were told that there was a plan put in place for the Barron, and that is why this was moving the way it's moving. What's been suggested so far in this meeting is that there's not the concrete plan for the Barron that was put in place that we were originally told there was.
Sorry, I don't think that, I've not meant to misrepresent. There is a concrete plan in place. The Barron, it has been approved by the University Court that the Barron will close. So I don't think that's not.
So what you're saying, Katie, is that the university decided the Barron would close and then told the students. Gavin has just said that there was no consultation, and that is true.
Well, I don't think that's entirely accurate, but that is perhaps the way that, Gavin and I can discuss that separately.
Yeah, I think we should move on to more questions, because I know there's many questions. Georgie, you said that you wanted a question.
I do. I am marketing officer with Mermaids. First of all, just to say, this wasn't at any point. We were just presented with the fact that we were closing. But my main point is, I understand that you may not be at liberty to discuss this, but I would also like to other university cuts in the arts, as I'm sure you all are, and let's face it, I think that many of us feel that these decisions are ultimately cuts in all sense of the words, whether the space repurposed or not. And I want to clarify that it isn't only our arts community that is having to make a very, very significant sacrifice. Obviously, I'd rather no part of the university was impeded financially, but I want to make sure that the Barron hasn't been sacrificed for the benefit of other communities who already have really rich resources available to them.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand exactly what your question is. Could you rephrase that for me?
I don't know exactly I'm sort of distinctly aware that the Barron has been cut, and it's, we've been discussing it at great length, the financial implications of that. And I think, as we spoke about in the last meeting that we had, the university is struggling financially. Whether that's, as a result of COVID or not, I'm sympathetic to that. But I want to understand that it isn't just the arts community that is losing the Barron. I want to understand that other communities at the university, their resources have been taken into consideration. We're obviously biased because the Barron is our space. It's something that's very, very precious to us. But I think that we'd like to think that it isn't just the arts that is having to basically throw away something that's very important to us.
Sorry, I apologise. It's after homeschool in my house, so my children have started shooting Nerf guns at each other. I've asked them to leave. The entire university has been looked at. This is not a cut, as you imagine it. It's what's called a rationalisation. It's a consolidation of our estate. Particularly, it's not about money. It's about the consolidation of the estate and about thinking about the way that we best use our assets. So it's a business decision, but it's not a financial decision. But to reassure you, we have spent, and the senior management team of the university and the chief financial officer have spent months across the summer in particular, both preparing COVID resilience financial plans and also strategic plans for the multiple scenarios that could have fallen out from coronavirus. In all of those plans, our first and our foremost intention was to make sure that we were protecting what is most important to the university, and that is our students, our student experience, our staff and their experience of working at the university. So all of those things combined have driven all of our decision making. So I understand it's difficult without the full financial plan in front of you to understand that this is not about a financial cut. It's not about saving money. It's about better investing our money and better investing in the resources that are going to give students the best possible experience of student theatre at St Andrews. Because ultimately, the Barron Theatre, whether it happens now or whether it happens in 2 or 3 years, was never fit for purpose long term and always required fabric investment. And that building will now, and the intention is that that building will now form part of a much bigger capital plan project. And so it would have closed eventually anyway. This way, we save student theatre. And I think that's much more important. And I don't like the implication that I'm being cast as an arts hater. My job is to develop the culture, the arts and culture provision at the university. And I spent my entire 4 years as a student working and performing in student theatre. So this is also an area that is important to me personally, as well as to me in my role.
I just to come back to that, I don't quite see, and forgive me, I could be missing something, but I don't quite see how this is considered to be beneficial to the student experience when no student has been consulted at any point.
Again, I totally disagree with you that no student has been consulted at any point. We have worked very closely with the Mermaids presidents and with the sabbatical officers. We have not consulted more broadly, yes, but that's what we're doing now. And in fact, that's what I want this conversation to be about. I want this conversation to be where you can tell us what's important to you so that we can make sure that we preserve that as part of the agreements going forward.
It sounds like the Barron's quite important.
But is it the Barron space? In which
yes,
case, yes, I think the Barron space, the Barron Theatre Company. But if it's the Barron space, then we need to know what it is about the Barron space so that we can make sure that we provide that for you.
Well,
Joe, I'm sorry, I will interject there. That has to come from the students who work in the Barron.
Okay, well, listen, in that case, I think it would be a good idea to read some of the comments from the students on the chat.
Yeah,
because the students are making it very clear that, and to say that the students were consulted by consulting the Students' Association and the Mermaids after the fact the fact that the point that this decision was made and then presented without asking what the students thought about their space, that remains, and you cannot take that away from the students. Okay, I have said more than I meant to, and I'm probably just going to shut up now.
Callie, I think were you wanting to say something as well?
I was just going to come in and address a little bit about the time that we can offer. And we know that you're losing your home, and we know that that's really important to you. So just want to try and address what we can offer. The studio, our staff have only been aware of this also since January. So we're working as a team on looking at how we can reposition some of the activity that we have currently and the commitments we have ongoing. But looking, and let me just say again, all of this discussions with the students have still to happen. But what we think we will be able to offer in a broad brushstroke at the moment is roughly going to be about 5 days a week, possibly a bit more sometimes, and occasionally a bit less, because we have, as you know, festivals that come in for 3 days and take over the building. And that would be based on, 10 in the morning till 10 at night. And our plan is that we say to you, this is when the space is available, and then you schedule it as you like, as you have always done. We're not going to try to run your organization for you. We're just going to say, this is when it's your home. You make it your home, make it your own. You don't even have to ask anyone to get into anything. It'll just all be there for you to help yourselves. So just to, let you know that we are thinking really hard about maximizing the space for you and giving you that absolute autonomy and independence, that you come in as a residency and you take up your home.
Thanks for that, Callie. Just try and move on through questions. Bella, you said your hand's up, I think.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Bella. I'm the current Vice President of Mermaids. I would just like to express that I think the decision to move us into this Bio studio space stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of how the Barron is used and how much it's used. And I would like to draw attention specifically to, so last year I was the productions coordinator on Mermaids Committee. I ran the 2019 Freshers Drama Festival. For the Freshers Drama Festival is a massive operation. It's the most important way we get freshers involved. Most people on committee started through the Freshers Drama Festival. And it involved, for me, last year, having the Barron Theatre booked out fully for an entire week. We had 2 shows on a night. The space was booked out for the entire day, that entire week, so that every show got a get in. As far as I can tell, we've not really, there's not nearly the amount of storage space in the Bio that we have in the Barron. And I can't really see how 6 shows going up in 1 week are going to be able to store, I can't see how we're going to be able to store 6 shows worth of set props and costumes, to allow one of the most important events that Mermaids runs to happen in this space, especially considering I believe there's a noise bleed between this studio and the main space, meaning they can't be used at the same time. So that the Freshers Drama Festival, for the Freshers Drama Festival as it has run in the past, to happen in this studio space, effectively nothing else would be able to happen in the Bio, main space or studio for that entire week. So I would just like to know, is it possible for anything on that scale to happen?
Yes, it is. So this is where we think, when we get into having these in-depth discussions with students, we'll be able to address all of these things. We know this festival is very important to you. We would be willing to clear the decks of everything as necessary in order to make that happen. I know that Jess can talk to you about, yes, we can make sure that you can do 6 get-ins. We're both practitioners in theatre. We both are very, very experienced in things like tight turnarounds and where we can store sets and make all of that happen. So we want you to please understand, all of you, we really care about making this work for you. We really, really do. And that is the point of the discussions going forward, is that we understand what's very important to you, what we can manage, and when we can't manage something, because there will be things we won't be able to manage, that we can find other ways for you to manage it. There are other spaces in the university, I'm sure, that can be found for rehearsals if they can't all happen at the Bar or whatever. We want to listen and we want to find out what's important, and then we will set about making that work. So we want you to be really reassured about that. You're right, there is a noise bleed. We're in the process now of discovering in a very detailed way what exactly are the parameters of how that noise bleed affects one space. It doesn't mean something can't happen. It means if there's a very loud band in the main auditorium, then you might not want to do something very quiet in the studio, and vice versa. But it doesn't mean you can't do some activities at the same time. And again, we think that with everybody's willingness and creativity, we can absolutely make that work. But it will require willingness on everybody's part. But I do think we can make that work. And we are going to be very careful about how we program the spaces because of that.
Okay, just that I would like to say that we already use the maximum amount of rehearsal time we can use in the union, and in most other spaces around the university we end up very, very pressed for rehearsal space every year. Already using the Barron for rehearsals and shows basically all day, every day, throughout every semester, and then also in the summer as well for fringe shows. So I can't really see how that translates, but I mean, yeah.
I think it's very important that you're involved in the discussions going forward about the practicalities and the nuts and bolts of what it is that you need in the residency. So thank you, Isabella. I think that's been very useful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Callie. I think just because I know someone else asked this at the very beginning, that they'd like a definition of as much time as possible. Do we have that, or a date when you'll kind of know what that means?
It is going to vary a little bit from week to week, and that is where we would like to bring, we've put a very detailed schedule together of various activities in the Bar, what noise levels we think they are on a week by week, day by day basis, and that's the next bit of the negotiation. We sit down. I've said I think broadly that might work out at sort of 12, 13 hour day, 5 days a week, but sometimes that can be more, and occasionally that might be a little bit less. But I think it's a chunky amount of time, but I'm also aware that it's not what you're used to having.
And what it does is it reduces student drama and the production of student drama. It's not 7 days a week. It's not 12, 13 hours, 14 hours per day, per week. It is a reduction of student drama. So I know I said I was going to shut up, but this thing is half baked. It hasn't been thought through properly. The university's executive hasn't thought how the students were going to react. And the reactions were, and Callie, I feel sorry for you here. I do, because you're facing a barrage of resistance. And if anybody wants to read some of the comments that are going up there, the university executive should be sitting down and explaining to the students how they can justify reducing student drama space. I know, because I'm involved in it, and students have been making this comment, there is not enough space already. And if you take away the space that is the Barron and say, let's try and cram everybody into the Students' Association, or the Barron, maybe 3 days a week, or maybe 4, maybe 5, who knows? Oh, and let's have a noisy show in 2 venues at the same time in the Barron. It is a reduction in student drama output. That is bottom line. And that is, for a university that trumpets diversity and involvement in the arts, etc., that is not acceptable. Right?
I guess I'm supposed to respond to that, Joe. As
I wasn't asking you to respond to it, Kaylee. I was trying to make a point. And the point is,
well, I mean, I'm
students
very
here
happy to share with you all of the detailed mapping that we've done and the case that we don't believe that this is a reduction. There's a reduction in what you are valuing here, which is the important thing, is that you value unrestricted access. And I'm afraid that is an area that we are going to have to compromise on, but that is not a reduction in output, it is not a reduction in production. It is intended that this is a consolidation and growth of student theatre. The way in which students wish to grow is entirely up to them within the template that we'll put around it, but it's not a reduction, it's a change.
I think, should we move to Molly?
Can I just ask, how is 5 days a week as opposed to 7 not a reduction?
I think, Joe, we can pick this up when this is, you know, we have plenty of opportunity to speak to each other. This is for the students to be speaking to us, and we need to hear from them.
Okay, in that case, I'm leaving the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, Molly, would you like to ask a question?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much. It's honestly really heartwarming to see this huge community of theater makers that have come up through Mermaids. I'm recognizing people who, you know, were my good friends freshman year, who really taught me how to use this space, how to be an artist independently, and have helped me through my journey as an actor and theater maker so much. And it's so lovely to see you all again. And I do just want to point out, before I raise a question, to Dr. Stevenson and Jess and Callie, how this space specifically and this entity has created a family of people who are not only willing to sign a petition online, but who are willing to give up over an hour of our time on, you know, on a Friday evening to sit on an additional Zoom call and defend this place and what it means to us, and ensure that our voices are heard. I think that's something that's really unique, and I hope that that's something that you all are recognizing as well. I know you all are. So thank you for that. I think one of my first questions has been raised in the chat a couple of times, and again, I would really like to direct y'all's attention to the chat, and I hope that you will take the time after this meeting to go through and read through it, because I think a lot of student points are being expressed in the chat. And I think you will find a lot of what we are finding important and difficult about this situation expressed there. But one of the biggest questions that I would like to ask you all, and I hope you will not take this in a confrontational way, but when was the last time that that any of you were able to attend a show in the Barron? That's directed at Dr. Stevenson as well as Callie and Jess. When was the last time you were able to attend a show held in the Barron?
I'm sorry to say that I haven't at all. Jess and I came into post in September last year and did a lot of running uphill to get to know everyone and everything that was going on. And then lockdown happened. So I have not been in the Byre, I'm sorry to say. We did attend many student performances in the Byre, but yeah, time got away from us.
I'm trying to think if mine might be 2019.
And do you remember what show it was?
The Scots performance of the Flighting. Which was done with the School of English and Rhiannon and Purdy in the School of English.
Okay. Great.
Might be 2018. I can't remember years better.
Have you been able to attend a Mermaids show held there, or a Blind Birth show, which happens every week, or any of the Freshers' Festival shows? Which
no, but I would like to understand why you're asking.
The purpose of me asking this is to express a question that has been brought up in the chat multiple times now by various people who have held positions in Mermaids and students who exist here. But I think the main reason that I am trying to be sure that this is brought up and discussed is that the decision to close the Barron came from what it feels like was a group of people that don't quite understand and have no experience of the Barron as a place as it exists for us. And that, I hope you all can understand, is a very difficult pill to swallow. Additionally, the fact that this decision, I think a lot of the sort of anger and hurt in this is coming from the fact that this decision was made without, we were consulted on the decision being made, and our representatives weren't consulted on the decision being made. I understand that Martin and Gavin have been in consultations, but rather than being presented with a question of, hi, the university is hoping to expand student spaces and everything into this area. We are considering closing the Barron as part of this. Can you talk to us more about what this space means and what we would need to provide for if we were to close it? Rather than consulting with us at that point where we could have expressed all of these things that you've been asking us to, and made it clear to you how important this building and this space was for us. We were instead handed this situation of the Barron will be closing. You don't have a say as to whether this building survives or whether this place survives. You're just now being consulted after it has been decided that it is closing. And I do respect that, you know, Dr. Stevenson and Callie and Jess, I understand that you guys are giving up your Friday evenings as well. And I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. However, I also think that something that is really clear is that as much as you have discussed there being a concrete plan for this, there are concrete details that are very much missing. And I think that's another point that a lot of us are not only angry about, but very scared about, especially seeing as due to the almost year-long hiatus of theater being able to exist in like Mermaids, Blind Mirth, Just So, the Comedy Society, and all the other groups that use that space, the knowledge, the cultural knowledge within the St. Andrews student body of the Barron is leaving soon. Like, we are graduating, and we will not be able to pass this information on to the younger generations that will now sort of potentially be losing that. And we are scared about our culture of the theater group at St. Andrews sort of disappearing as we do. I think the biggest concern that I have is that these concrete details that have been promised are not actually there. And I understand that this is part of an ongoing conversation and ongoing situation, which again, I appreciate very deeply that you all are giving your time to. But ultimately, I think a lot of us are very confused and very hurt and feeling a little bit double talked to, because on one hand, you're saying that there are concrete plans in place. And then on the other hand, you're saying that, you know, you don't know whether the seating rack will be able to fit in. And if it doesn't, you don't know who will be paying for that.
No, we've not said that. That's factually inaccurate. We do know who will pay for it.
Okay, I apologize. Kate asked that question earlier, and I did not hear a concrete answer to who would be paying for it. But if there's a plan for that. Well, I answered Kate that direct question directly in a meeting yesterday or the day before, so she does know the answer. I think Kate is shaking her head. Okay, the answer is, as we've agreed, that if that the university will absorb the costs of the move, because that is our obligation to you morally. The seating rack belongs to you. Any servicing or any other elements of that, or aspects, improvements, extensions, whatever it is that you want to do with that, will be borne by your society, not by the university nor the buyer. But all of the other elements will be borne by the university.
So, would you describe having to buy a new seating rack to make the space good for performance as part of the move, or is that something that? Well,
if a new seating rack needs to be looked at, then we will look at that as part of our normal planning process.
Anyway, I just think that a lot of us are potentially feeling like some of these, you know, by saying there are concrete plans and then also not having very many answers to a lot of these questions, and repeatedly saying that, you know, you guys want to understand, you want to know what students want to preserve. and yet this decision was made without any consultation of that, is a little bit difficult for all of us. And
so the solution, Molly, is, and I really appreciate the position that you're coming from, and I have a lot of emotion surrounding the feelings that the context that we're in brings up in that very point that you described, that you're leaving, there's no opportunity to pass on knowledge to the next generation. These are very real feelings which are happening across more than just one set of groups of friends and groups of colleagues and societies and cultures. This is the nature of the world in which we're currently in, and is very destabilizing, and it's quite upsetting. So I really appreciate that sentiment, and I can understand that as part of, you know, the sort of, when one leaves a university and moves on to the next stage of their life, the retention of the St Andrews that they know is really important. What I would suggest is that we have a lot of time at the moment across the next semester. There will be no theatre across the semester that we can anticipate. Certainly, it just doesn't seem that there will be any lifting of the government restrictions, and all we're hearing is that those restrictions are going to continue to be extended, and maybe extended considerably into later in the year. So what we have is time, and what we can do with that time is make sure that all of the points that you're raising here are addressed to everyone's satisfaction. But as with everything, there is compromise. There are things where we may not be able to deliver it immediately, but we will prioritise it for future years. But what is important is the process, and that's what you've talked about, is that we haven't asked you directly about the nuts and bolts. What we are doing next, and what the plans are next, is to ask for names and groups of people who we should be working with on each of these issues. Martin, I suspect maybe even it's more appropriate for the sabbatical officers to coordinate those lists, and we will form groups and work with you through the issues that we're talking about in order to present a satisfactory concrete plan. We have a concrete framework. The plan of what will happen is in place, but the detail is what we yet need to work out. And that's why it's so important that your voice is heard.
And I think one question that a lot of us have is there a process? Is there a group of people that will hear us appealing this decision to close the Barron? Is this a possibility? I think this is a lot of what everyone is saying, is that we don't, as you know, all the people who have signed the petition, as the nearly 100 of us that are on this call have expressed, we oppose this closure. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that, you know, in the communication that y'all have been giving back to us, I think consistently the response from y'all has been that we are happy to talk with you from now on about how to, you know, preserve these things and continue to use this space. But I think one of the questions we are all asking is there a way for us to stop this from happening?
So the decision has been, so bluntly, the decision has been taken by the university that the space will not reopen as a theatre.
And is there a space for all of us who are expressing these feelings to talk to the university about this new planned sort of student hub, and that you have said was, you know, there are sort of plans for, but not really, you know, concrete plans for, and there are a lot of processes that still has to go through. If that is the main reason that the Barron is being closed, rather than, you know, in immediate and direct finding.
I know, but I think the next step is that, so I'll speak to Gavin next week, and we'll set up a framework for us to all work together on preserving the elements. We are confident that we have spoken so in depth, and I think Martin will attest to this. He's actually been overwhelmed with meetings, I think, in the past couple of months about this, where he's been representing your views beautifully, and really has said everything that you have said tonight. Martin has been negotiating on your behalf. We haven't been consulting, we have been negotiating all the way through with Gavin, with Martin, and with Tom. So this is not a kind of decision that we've just said this has to happen and that's that. Your student representatives have been negotiating on your part and have raised all of the issues that you've raised tonight. But what we don't have is the planned detail, and that's the next bit. I will speak to Gavin and we'll work out a framework that can happen. But I think certainly those who are current students and are very vocal and have very clear sense of what should be achieved, we would want you to be on those groups.
Could I just quickly clarify that yeah, we've been absolutely Gavin and Tom and I have been absolutely involved in many meetings, but I would just like to specify that those have been about moving into the buyer space and not specifically about what the future of the Barron building is. So I think in the interest of being completely transparent, I would just specify that.
And I think, Dr. Stevenson, that is the problem for a lot of us, is that, yes, Martin, Gavin, Tom have been consulted, but they have been consulted as our representatives about a move that, although very generous and very kind from Callie and Jess and the buyer, is not a move that I think a lot of us are enthusiastic about. It seems like they were placed, this idea of this move was given to them, and yes, they've been negotiating about it after the fact. But I think that the main grit in a lot of our shoes is that the initial decision was made without consultation of those people who are meant to represent the student body. And I think from here, I've spent enough of everybody's time speaking on this call, and so thank you all very much for listening. But that's, I think after that, there are so many hands that are raised, and I think it's time we kind of move on to that.
Thanks very much, Molly. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of hands. I'll try and go through the ones I've got listed here. So Aya Oshia. Hello.
Aya, but it's all good. I'm Aya. I was the Barron manager 2019, 2020. And I just wanted to bring up some of the details about time in the Barron, because I managed the calendar for a year. It's a very intense time. It's booked out solidly. And the important thing of that is that we are student key holders and that we are completely responsible for our own time there. And as students, we have very intense, busy schedules, and we do work late into the night, and we rehearse in the Barron 24/7. And I just think that this is such an important thing to be assured that it can continue in the buyer. And we thank you so much for talking to us. But it is the reason that student theatre can happen in the way it does is because of the space that we have. And so many shows are allowed to happen. And it's really unique for a university to have that. And we treasure that so much. And I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
I think just kind of on that, because I know someone mentioned key holders. So the way it works is we have 4 key holders, 6 key holders,
6,
sorry.
Yeah.
So I just, some clarification of, I know it's not been discussed yet, but will this be something that you're hoping to continue if it's happening in the buyer, or what's the thoughts around controlling access to the space and the building?
So I don't know if Callie and Jess want to pick it up, and I think there's issues that are what would be immediately come September in the coronavirus context, which is very, very different and brings into it all sorts of risk assessment responsibilities and which limits who can be in which building at what time. So there is an immediate context answer, but there's also then a buildings operation answer. So Callie and Jess might want to pick up on how the practice is at the buyer.
I can talk only to what we currently do, because we haven't had discussions about what might need to be adapted. But currently our operations are that we have a duty manager present at all times that the building is occupied. So from opening the building up, actually the cleaners open the building up at first light, and then an operations manager comes on from about 8 a.m. and then is there until the end of the last bit of activity, whether that's the end of a get out at midnight or end of a show earlier in the evening. That's our current, is that we have the key holder is the duty manager. And they have responsibilities in evacuation, they have responsibilities in first aid, all those things.
Because of course, obviously the building is open to the public. It means there are more people in the building than just necessarily would be the students in the studio. So there is that greater responsibility about health and safety and fire evacuation and so on.
Yeah. There's also other issues around other policies like lone working policies and all sorts of other safety issues, which means that perhaps compliance needs to be looked at. And might, I don't know, but it sounds like that there might be some compliance issues with processes already, but we need to make sure that the way you operate maps onto appropriate compliance, health and safety compliance and regulations, and that you are safe at all times. That's the most important thing.
Thank you. I also had one more quick question, if that's okay. And this one's for Callie and the buyer. How will this move affect your work and your intake of professional shows? And how will you manage having us as a residency, but also your current work with the buyer and not letting either of those compromise each other?
Everything that's already, all the regular activity that's booked into the main auditorium, so the student groups, the local community groups, professional touring groups will carry on. We just have to be clever about scheduling, and we would be doing that in conjunction with the Barron. We think we can make that work, but it will take, you know, I think we have to be upfront about the fact that it is a challenge. There is a tension between all the spaces, but I think the willingness to rise to the challenge will enable us all to overcome them. I think, you know, we can earmark time where we can make certain things happen. As you know, I think as long as we're clever about that scheduling, I don't see why that needs to be a compromise we can't all cope with.
Fab, thank you so much. And I just wanted to thank you for listening to my questions. I've been in touch with quite a lot of alumni who are working professionally in theatre now, and I know that we are prioritising current students, and so they're not raising their voice at the moment, but I know that they really wanted to emphasise the skills and the work experience that running the Barron has given them, and how unique that has made it to actually get a job in, I think, what quite a lot of the people on this call want to do, and is very difficult. And we know it's a very difficult industry, and what a wonderful gem the Barron has been for their professional development. And also ask you to take a look at the petition, and specifically the comments below the petition, because people are telling their stories about how the Barron has influenced their career, and they are really inspirational. But thank you very much for your time.
They are inspirational, and I mean, that is one of the reasons why we are excited. That's the right word, excited, but also totally acknowledging that it's not such a happy move for some of you. We hope that eventually you might feel differently, but the passion and the dedication that you bring is exactly what is exciting to us. And just to keep saying that those skills that you've developed through your theatre, we think will absolutely continue, because you will continue to operate independently, and to have all of those jobs that you do will continue to happen that way. I suppose what we can offer is the expertise that exists within the buyer. Jess and myself and the rest of the team are available to you if and when you want it, and that perhaps that, you know, you can consider that an asset going forward.
Thanks very much. I know there's many hands up. Two of whom were on my list, but don't appear to be any more. So just checking. Sam and George, were either of you wanting to ask questions?
Yes. I'm Sam. Oh, Sarah, if you could turn your sound off. Sorry, we have two computers currently running this. I am the training representative for the entertainments committee within the Students' Union, so I'm responsible for all the health and safety training that goes on in there. I also work within the buyer quite a lot as a technician, and I had a question regarding, obviously you're saying that the ability to work within all the different roles on a student performance will be maintained. And my question is specifically, how will that work in terms of technical aspects within the studio? given that access to the lighting rig requires the use of a genie.
So we've been talking about that, whether it should remain a genie, and we make sure that people have their IPAF tickets, which is the certification you need to use a bit of mobile elevated platform MUBE, or we use Zargis, and we haven't come to the answer on that yet. It's definitely part of the list of questions that's there.
Thank you. And just building on that, obviously that kind of training is rather expensive, and obviously ladder training isn't. Will there be funds available for the training of students in terms of health and safety training and technical expertise training?
I think we can confirm you will get the training that you need.
Okay, because currently there is.
And some that you maybe don't need but desire. So yes, that is an important element.
I think one question that I may just jump in and ask, sorry, Sam, I don't mean to interrupt, but can you confirm this, or can you ensure this?
I can ensure that.
Okay.
You will get those who need to be trained will be trained.
Thank you for
those who want to be trained, and those who might desire to be trained in certain areas, that I hope that we can deliver that. And I would expect that we can, but yes, those who need to be trained will be trained.
Will that overall not cost the university more money than?
It's big. This is not a decision about money. This is about we are investing in you. And I know that that's very difficult for you to understand at the moment, but in the longer term, this is a decision about consolidating our activity in one place in order to give you more. And whether that's more training or more whatever, that is what we will do.
And the final question I have, if that's okay, is regarding the workshop space. And I know this has been brought up a couple of times. I would simply ask for if any of you have any current suggestions as to what could potentially be the workshop space, given that none of the student shows within the Bayer or the Barron or the Student Union could happen without the existence of a workshop space.
So I'm very happy for Callie and Jess to pick this up, but we are aware that we don't have all the information about what you need, and because those conversations haven't taken place yet. But once we ascertain precisely what you need now, what you might need in the future, how things might grow, then we can look at it. There are short-term workarounds that might work, that might not. We need to look at it, but that is one of the working groups for ascertaining precisely what it is you need, and then we will look to finding the solution to that.
One thing I would just urge against any short-term workarounds when it comes to the health and safety of workshops. But thank you.
No, I just meant more sort of spaces that we might be able to use over a year rather than a longer-term place, not actual what I realised that now implied.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks very much. I'm trying to keep this kind of focused on students, although I know there's a lot of talk in the chat about wanting to hear from Grace, and Grace did have her hand up fairly near the beginning. So Grace, would you like to ask your question?
Hello. I don't want to take up current students' times too much, but I have worked in both the Bayer and the Barron, and I do have a couple questions regarding things that have been said. First off, the word residency keeps being used. Residency would imply it's a temporary solution for where to put the Barron, and I was just wondering if that was a miscommunication or if that was true.
Callie and Jess can speak to that. It was suggested in consultation with the sabbatical officers and Mermaids president as a way of clearly identifying autonomy. So I suspect that Callie and Jess and I are sort of mildly amused because we thought that actually gave you more autonomy as a term. But in terms of the permanency, this is a permanent home. So it's not a temporary residency. But Callie and Jess can speak more to the kind of concept. But the broader point is that we are not fixed on a name. You can call, or the current students can choose what this is. Is it a theatre company? Is it a residency? Is it whatever? That's entirely up to you. But
that isn't really the most important thing. It was more curiosity on my part.
I think.
Well, Callie, I think Callie wants to say something.
Yeah, no, I think I used that word to exactly that, suggest a home rather, that you would still have all that identity and autonomy. But yes, permanent.
Okay, fine. My next question is about storage. I know that the series storage is a ways out of town. And though the offer to use the buyer's store as well is super generous, I was wondering how you expect students to access their own stores, especially because they're accessed for everything from performances themselves to actual putting together of proposals to just rehearsals.
I think Jess might be able to speak to that, but we are working quite closely on what students want in terms of access, and we will put in place a plan around that depending on the facilities that we have available in terms of transportation, in terms of access, in terms of all sorts of other things. But Jess might be able to expand a little bit more on where the thinking is at. But that, again, is a work stream that hasn't been worked through yet.
Yeah, I agree. We just want to make something efficient that uses people's time and the resource of van trips as to everybody's advantage.
Yeah, but to be clear, the buyer props and sets assets that are at the and the collection which is at the store will also be available to the Barron Theatre, and so the combined collection is substantial. But the Barron costumes and props collection will remain the property of the Barron Theatre. It's and the Students' Association. It's not. It won't be merged as a collection.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just to confirm that there's no set plan in place for accessing student props or buyer props for that matter.
Well, the Barron Committee hasn't been asked to provide us with their needs yet. They will be asked. That there isn't a concrete plan because we haven't yet had conversations with them about precisely what they would like. Okay,
thank you. And my last question is, what other spaces are going to be available, given that as generous as the buyer studio is as an offer, it will be a significant reduction in time in the Barron, which I think has been brought up before, but I was wondering what other places will be available, given that the union is, as far as I was aware currently and 2 years ago when I was there, basically permanently booked out.
So I mean, that's it's a university question rather than a buyer question. At the current moment, and for those who are in St Andrews and have been in St Andrews this semester, you will be aware and familiar with how very different St Andrews feels. We have transformed the entire university estate into a COVID-safe space. And that has meant that many spaces and buildings are used differently and will continue to be. Some won't, some will. What that does is makes a bigger jigsaw puzzle while social distancing is in place for us to have to work through. So there are many, many complications with making categorical commitments. This space can be available 24 hours a day, this space. But what I can say broadly is we recognise the pressures of space. We are all dealing with those pressures. And once we understand what it is you need, we will be able to deliver on that. The bigger context to this is that we have just moved, and it happened during the first lockdown. We have just moved a large proportion of our staff and their offices out to our campus at Eden Campus. And this has freed up office space and other kinds of space. So it's not all just office space, but other kinds of space right across the university estate. What we have currently done, and the buyer will also be aware of this, is we have currently said our chief priority is to be able to deliver in-person teaching. So we have converted all of our spaces that are suitable to in-person teaching spaces. Now, as soon as social restriction, and these are spaces that have never before been used for teaching, but have to be used in the current circumstance. So that's what we did as a university. We prioritised in-person teaching as important. And I hope that our current students agree with that decision, that has been the right use of our estate. When social distancing restrictions are reduced, or we can maybe move down, as in those who are dialing in from England may not be aware that we have never been allowed to run at a 1 metre distance. We have always had to run at a 2 metre distance. And as such, it has put pressures on our estate. When we can start to retract from that, when the government says we can, then we will review the spaces that we have, the entire kind of fixed and permanent population of our staff complement, where they are, how they work, and what spaces that frees up and how we're going to use it. So the issue, I can say this in that I'm not concerned for you about space. We just need to work out what you need and when and what kind of space. And over time, once we're able to operate the estate normally, then we can do that. Whilst we're still working with restrictions, as with everything, you will have to compromise with us because we can't deliver spaces that we don't have, and we can't have you in spaces that aren't safe.
That's all very fair. I just have one more question, really, which is, and I'd just like a no, yes or no answer on it, which is there an appeals process for this decision?
There's not a formal appeals process. You would need to make a case to the university court, which has decided that this is how we will strategically use the estate.
But the university court would listen to appeals.
You'd need to contact the court office for any appeals process, but this is an appeal on the decision by the university court, so it's an appeal on a decision by the Board of Governors.
Fine, thank you. I would just like to say before I hand off to current students who are definitely more deserving of this time, I've been working professionally since I left St. Andrews in theatres, and the reason I was able to get the jobs that I have gotten is because I was a Barron key holder and I worked professionally with the buyer, and it was the combination of having unlimited workshop space, holding keys to a theatre that we were basically running ourselves, and the professional expertise that the buyer had that allowed me to do that. And I think stripping away two of those resources is really completely unfortunate, but thank you very much.
And also, just to jump in, I understand this isn't my time, but just to clarify, Grace hasn't just been working in professional theaters, she's been working at the National Theatre. So I understand she's being humble, and I know a lot of people on this call have amazing credentials that are similar, but I do think that there's quite a big difference between, you know, working at maybe a professional theater in some small place and working at the National Theatre, which is what Grace's Barron experience allowed her to do.
Which is to be commended, and that, as I've said to Grace in correspondence that I've had with her in the past few days, precisely what we want to retain. We want to retain that employability, that amazing experience which gives you, which opens doors for you.
Thanks very much, everyone. I know we've gone past the allotted time, but I think there's probably still a couple of questions. I'd just like to reinforce that if your question's about something that's been asked already, it would be best not to do that, just questions on new topics. And also just, I would like to know like how long Katie and Callie and Jess, you're wanting to stay for this.
I have as much time as is necessary.
Okay.
Likewise, yeah.
Moving on, Alexandra Upton.
Hi. I did want to preface this with thank you all for taking the time to meet with students. We do appreciate it. I know it's a really complicated conversation and there are a lot of issues to go over, but we definitely do appreciate your taking the time to listen to our concerns. The concern that I wanted to voice, which I know has been brought up in the chat several times, is that while we do appreciate the Buyer as an incredible space, I've had the privilege to perform in it numerous times over the course of my 2 years before lockdown. Over the course of the last year, we were, as student organizations, having a bit of difficulty with the Buyer in terms of our time and space in the space being limited. And speaking as the vice president of the Gilbert and Sullivan Society and the secretary of the Opera Society, we actually had to have some tricky conversations with the Buyer. We had longstanding contracts with set dates for shows each semester, and we were told that those contracts actually weren't set in stone and we needed to renegotiate for our dates, and we were told that we might not actually get our full 3 shows, we might only get 2 shows because the space is so limited. We also know that our friends over at the Gesso Society had their time slot taken away in November because you guys extended the pantomime, which again, we understand that the Buyer is a business and there are lots of incredible performing arts groups that do get to perform there, and so time is difficult to allot, but I am concerned that if we are going to be relying on the Buyer for rehearsal space, performance space, And we've already had difficulty in the past with maintaining the time slots that we already have there, that we're going to have a hard time scheduling time in that rehearsal space. And one of the greatest parts of the Barron, as I know a lot of people have mentioned, is the fact that it is scheduling that is regulated by students for students. And we have complete autonomy with when we can schedule and where we can schedule. And so I am worried that we're not going to have that autonomy, and that while you're talking about giving us more time and more space, our time and our space in the Bayer was actually already being pretty severely limited even before this.
I'm going to interject before I let the Bayer respond to that, because I've seen some of the comments. I just want to say, Alexandra, thank you very much. I think your concerns do speak to the Bayer as was. And I have seen many comments coming in which are a little bit disrespectful for my tastes. And I think it's appropriate to point out at this point that Callie and Jess have been directors of the Bayer since autumn last year. They are new in, they have developed a new strategy. There is a fairly substantial new staffing that has also happened across the course of 2019 and into 2020. The Bayer is a very different place. And we have been working extremely hard to get a strategic plan, a vision, and a way of working at the Bayer, which makes it absolutely robust and a joy to work in, with all the right vision and values behind it. The problems which are being described in some of the chat bars, we have ended those problems. So the Bayer is not the Bayer that you have experienced. It is going forward a new Bayer. And I just want to say that before I see any more comments about the Bayer in the chat, which are negative, because this does not represent the Bayer that Callie and Jess are leading. And I think that's a very important point to make. So over to you now to respond to the specific points that Alexandra made.
Thanks, Katie, and thanks, Alexandra. So just to explain a little bit of background of some of what you're talking about, when we arrived in post, we discovered that all the dates for student and local community activity had been programmed 10 years ahead, which sometimes meant that, you know how it goes, if you do something on the 6th one year and you program it in the 6th the next year, it might fall into a different actual week. So we had a massive problem of those dates being programmed. This is where Just So went wrong last year. Just So had been programmed into a date that should have been a Panto date. And that was because they'd been programmed 10 years in advance without anyone looking actually kind of what week it fell to. So unfortunately, we had to go to Just So and talk to them about that difficulty and renegotiate a way forward. However, that said, that was unfortunate, and hopefully we have now been looking at all of those dates the years ahead to make sure that doesn't happen again. And we are absolutely committed to the amount of time that students have. I'm not sure where that's come from about students being told that their bookings would be cut. I'm not aware of that, and it's certainly not what we would like to have happen. We are really keen that the students use the space widely, socially, for their work. We want that to happen. So we have absolutely no sense of cutting anything that the students will be doing. Does that address your concerns?
It does. I'm just wondering, and this is a point that Grace just brought up, the Bayer schedule is already so packed, and the Barron does tend to host 15 to 20 performances over the course of the year between all of the organizations that use it. The Bayer, I don't think, is going to be able to accommodate encompassing all of those shows, even with the additional use of the black box space, especially because you can't use the black box space for performance if someone's performing downstairs and vice versa.
No. So the bookings that are in the auditorium at the moment will absolutely be not touched by any of this. The space for the Barron Theatre activity, or whatever normally happens in that space, will go into the studio space, and we are really committed to making that work. I think 15 to 20 performances over the course of the year is very doable, and we're already identifying, again, we need to do that in negotiation with you to make sure they happen at the right times. And I do believe we can make that work. And, you know, as I've said, I understand that you are making compromises at your end, and so are we. And that transitional change is difficult. We do really appreciate that, but what we are really committed to is making it work with you as best we can. And if there are things that don't work, well, let's find solutions.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Gavin, just before you go on, I've seen some, I can't keep up with the chat as well as talk to people, so I'm not seeing all the comments, and I am happy to go through and address questions that aren't covered in the meeting if the meeting ends for any reason. So I will go through it and we'll provide responses if they haven't been covered. But what I'm seeing now is some coming through about the university court and the rector, and whether students are represented on the university court. I can just confirm the university court is chaired by the rector. So the rector is the chair of university court, and the student president and the director of education for the Students' Association sit on university court. Those students also sit on PARC, which is the Planning and Resources Committee, which discussed this matter in December. And that committee doesn't have the rector on it, but is chaired by the senior governor, who is Catherine Styler, who used to be the students' rector. So it has been seen by a lot of current and former student representatives at governance level. On top of that, the PARC papers are read in detail by the university court. So the university court membership is publicly available and it's online, but it does contain your student representatives who have all been part of the discussions around this and have formally approved it.
Thanks for that, Katie. Nicole Enten, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yes, hi, I'm Nicole. I'm a first-year student at St. Andrews, and as a first-year student interested in a career in theatre, interested in being a playwright, the student-led theatre community was an immense attraction when making my decision to come to St. Andrews. And a resource like the Barron, having an independent theatre run by students in every sense, the building included, for both mermaids and organizations outside of mermaids, is a strong aspect of that. We've already seen so many people come forward about the impact the Barron has had on their career. And when I was making my decision to come to the university, I thought a lot about that sort of consideration, how the theatre scene in St. Andrews, which is wonderful and incredible, will continue to further my career. And I think that it's really important to consider that so many students in future generations will not be having this resource. And I hope that you will consider the overwhelming response of students against your proposal, as you have stressed the importance of students' considerations in your decision. Because you have said time and time again that this is not a matter of money, this is a matter of investing in student concerns. Well, the student concerns appear to be, we want to keep the Barron. And why can't that be accommodated for, is my question. Why are we focusing on overhauling the Barron structure rather than bringing the infrastructure up to code? And that's really all my concerns. I hope you can address that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, because I've explained already that the space is going to be repurposed at some point in the future as part of the capital plan for the university. So it's part of the estate plan and part of what develops our student experience more broadly, not just theatre students, but all students. And that is a significant contributing factor to the decision not to reopen the Barron. The immediate context is that the level, and what then plays out is the level of investment that would be required, the level of additional staff support, for example, in order to make sure that all of the appropriate codes, compliance, legislation, and additional elements which sit around running a theatre like that the level of investment there would not be good value for money when we already have compliant areas that are available for you, and we can create as your space and give you all of the things that you value in a safe environment. The operations of the Barron were, regardless of what happened, as soon as any health and safety and risk assessment went through for COVID, would have to change radically. And this way we can preserve what you value the most and put it into an existing building which is fit for purpose, rather than have estates and environmental and health and safety services and the risk assessment process completely undo what you value by putting in place requirements to have security staff and professionals there all the time. So this is, and it's very difficult for, I realise, for those people who feel so strongly about this, and it's a sudden shock, but we have your best interests at heart. The university is here for students. That's what we're here for, and we act in your interests. And whilst it might be difficult to see, and it's difficult when I can say it's going to work out, it's going to be great, it's hard for you to know that and believe it, because you don't know me, you don't have no reason to trust me. But I can say the reason that the Barron is closing is a strategic operational decision for the university. What you value, it's my job to preserve that, and I think the buyer can do that job.
If you don't mind me just cutting in there, I want to say thank you so much for considering, as you say, or continually repeating that you have student concerns at heart. So what I feel is that there's been several petitions, there's been overwhelming responses about students feeling that their interests have not personally been taken to heart. So one of my questions as well would be, why not have involved the student body in sort of negotiations and discussions from the beginning, rather than throwing this kind of sudden revelation upon them? I'm sure that if you were a student as well, and you would want to have a sort of impact on the decision-making process. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. And as a student, had all sorts of things that were exactly the same that happened at the universities that I attended. I absolutely understand that. This is the start of the consultation process. You've mentioned petitions. No petition has been formally given to me. I am aware of petitions, and I'm aware that those petitions don't entirely contain factual information, which is what we're now giving you. But that they have not been presented to me, and therefore I've not been able to respond to them, and I am unaware of what they are petitioning about. So if process was followed with the petitions and they were presented to me, then I would respond. In terms of student engagement and student consultation, this is the start of that. An open meeting with you is the start of that, and what comes next will very much be determined by what it is and what you want to be involved in decision making around.
Just to follow up on that one last point, you say that it's as people have said in the comments time and time and again, you don't seem to be advocating for us to encouraging us that there are opportunities to question that decision, to ask kind of what can be done to supplant it. And I hope that everyone listening here will continue to kind of push those concerns forward, to bring those petitions to whatever supposedly kind of concrete reception that you need to see them and to respond to them, and to understand that so many people are being directly affected by this decision that really we haven't been able to make a consultation on. So yeah.
I mean, I would ask if and it's for you to put to your student representatives who can then feed it to us, and I've already said that I'll pick this up with Gavin next week. If you want that to be a survey of all students, that where we could take on comments and in-depth analysis, then that we could do that. Or if you want it to be individual working groups with people involved in the discussions, that's entirely up to you. If you want wider consultation, and then we can do a survey form so that everybody can have a chance to express that what they would like to see as the most important and the most valuable essence of the Barron retained.
Thanks very much for your points, Nicole. Moving on, Kaylee.
Hi, sorry, my internet's having a little bit of trouble. I am here. So my main question, this has been brought up a few times, but I don't feel like we ever got a full answer. We've kind of brought up questions about what the buyer can really give us as far as workshop space, as far as rehearsal space, that kind of thing. I was wondering, since this seems to have been a decision that is already made, and the university has said that they want to collaborate with us going forward, can there be some kind of team set up to work out those questions? Because as we've mentioned, we're losing a lot of space that isn't just stage space. I think that students need to be involved, if not with the loss of the Barron, at least with decisions regarding workshop space, storage. I mean, we cannot access a storage space miles out of town like we could access the Barron, clearly. So
that's exactly what we're proposing.
Yeah, I can say from the Students' Association, I mean, we've been working very hard on everything that we've been raising since the start of this discussion, like about the Barron and Barron in general, has been points that have been raised to us. I think we did a good job of capturing that, but what we need to do going forward is making sure that people can really add weight to that by making sure there's voices and names that have been a concrete part of the consultation. So as a Students' Association, we'll do more for that going forward.
Perfect, thank you.
Moving forward, Spencer.
Cool, thank you. Yes, I'd just like to start off by saying, Callie and Jess, thank you so much for being a part of this. Your input is really valuable, especially since it seems like you've been not consulted the way that we've been consulted. You've also just been told that this is happening and that you need to sort of make the best of the bad situation. So yeah, thank you to you very much. I want to start off with just saying that I've been to performances in both the Bayer and the Barron countless times, and in the different spaces of the Bayer. And the Bayer studio space and the Barron Theatre are both two very special spaces, very intimate spaces, but they're very different spaces that serve different purposes, especially for the shows that have been presented in the two different spaces in the past. So if the university's dedication is to the arts and the student experience, how can you justify reducing the number of dedicated spaces available for the arts instead of fully utilizing both the Bayer and the Barron individually? Callie has already mentioned that activities that are in the Bayer currently would need to be repositioned in order to make way for the new arrangement. So that just indicates that we're already envisioning losing aspects that are currently available.
Sorry, can I just jump in there, Spencer? Can I just jump in and say, yes. No, I didn't say that. We are absolutely committed to all the things that are currently happening in the main auditorium will remain.
I'm talking specifically about the studio space. Okay. That was a comment that you made earlier saying about some of the activities having to be repositioned that are currently taking place there.
I'm talking about the sorts of activities that aren't arts related. So some of the things that the Bayer has happen in its space that aren't arts related will be moved elsewhere to make way for the student activity.
Okay, thank you for that.
Clarify that. All right, thanks.
Then also, Katie, you asked what is it about the Barron that we really value? And I'd say that it's something similar to the reason why the West End is the West End and Broadway is Broadway. It's not the physical buildings, the physical infrastructure that exists in those places. It's the history of all the shows that have taken place there before, the history of the magic of theatre that has existed in those spaces for such extended periods of time. And the Bayer has its own magic, and the Barron has its own magic. And I think that's what we're trying to preserve, and why we're so upset with losing the space completely, because they are very different spaces. You said you're going to be repurposing the space and that it would be good value for money instead of bringing the building up to code, which I don't entirely understand, because you said that it's been overlooked for so long that you haven't been keeping it up to code, which that just seems like something that the university has slipped up on and that they should have been doing over the years and making sure that it remains up to code instead of
Spencer, can I interject? Because I think there's a misunderstanding there. So the building is currently leased to the Students' Association, and it wasn't a theatre originally. It was a arts centre. And maybe a decade ago, it might be 11, 12 years ago, around about that time, certainly in my lifetime at St Andrews, it was converted into a black box theatre studio for students' purposes, but it has been managed and maintained by the Students' Association and not by the university. So I think that's an important distinction to understand. And over time, the maintenance, the upkeep, all of the different, and the way that the theatre has been used has changed. And it has expanded, it has been different. And also what has changed is health and safety legislation and codes surrounding theatre practice and all of the kinds, and the requirements on testing, on PAT testing, on electrical testing, on boiler testing. This is very new in a workplace context. So I think the Students' Association have not failed to notice this, and the university has, as the landlord, has not failed to notice it. We have been aware of it for a long period of time. What we're now saying is that the situation is untenable as it currently stands if it was to reopen, because on top of all of that, there's the coronavirus legislation requirements, risk assessments that have to be put in place. And that requires us to act in as an institution in an even more restrictive way than we were before. And so it's the position is not that the university and the Students' Association as a body which is independent of the university has failed to notice this, but it's reached a point where this is now the opportune moment for us to correct that and to put you somewhere which is fit for purpose.
So I'm happy with that correction taking place, but what I wonder about is how you've decided that this is the best decision to make without carrying out an evaluation of all the possible options and both the pros and the cons that go with like bringing the Barron up to code or moving over to the buyer, and an exact evaluation of what is taking place in the Barron currently. How would we move that to different spaces before making the decision to actually close the Barron Theatre? Because we know that the UK's plan, the UK government plan, is to have the majority of the country vaccinated by around June. So in theory,
it's October.
The virus.
The date that's been announced is October. No, it's always been October.
Cool. So that's still within the next year. So the coronavirus shouldn't be an issue that's going to be with us for 3, 4, 5 years time still. And if this is a decision that's being made for the long-term planning of the university, I think we should be looking beyond the virus.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Yeah, but that's what we're doing. This is and to sort of understand the decision-making process, this is a strategic operational decision which was taken in the much wider context of looking at all of the provision across the university. And so it's not that we said, the Barron's causing us trouble, let's close that. And that's not remotely how the process worked. We looked at all of the needs right across the board of all of the different constituents, including, I see people are commenting about the community needs, and I can reassure you that we also think about the community groups, about our community public face, our requirements across all of the different areas of our activity. And that's what has fed into the decision that actually we run a risk here, but we can fix it by doing something which makes things better for students.
So
that's
those
the bigger picture.
Reports and evaluations and things that you've looked at published anywhere? Can we access them somewhere?
The papers which are that touch on the Barron Theatre, which are public record, so the papers which are not public record, But there are papers, actually, I don't think there are any papers that are not public record in this case, because we haven't got papers about it in that sense that are private. But the public record papers are available through the university website, the minutes of Park and the minutes of the university court. You can go back for the last 20 or 30 years minutes and look through all of the discussions that have ever taken place about the Barron.
Okay, then final just quick statement and a quick question. So the quick question is, when are you looking to consult the community? Because obviously the Barron is a massive link between town and gown. I worked the box office for a long period of time, and the majority of the people who came and enjoyed the shows were community members during the time that I was on box office. And they really have a strong connection with the Barron Theatre and are so dedicated to supporting those shows. So when are they going to be brought into the conversation? Is there a plan?
Yeah, so the plan was to bring people in once we had something to say, and once the Barron Committee was able to decide whether they were going to be called the Barron Theatre at the Byre or the Barron Residence or something else entirely, because the Barron name doesn't need to be retained. It's not connected to the legacy at all. So there was all sorts of opportunities. That ship has sailed. You're all here. There are community members here tonight, and I have been speaking to several of them across the course of the week. We can include surveys, we can include community consultation, but I can reassure you that this has also been discussed in the governance structures of the Byre, which includes community representation there as well. So there is a stakeholders group, a community stakeholders group at the Byre, and there will be opportunity for all of our different community groups, including Byre Writers, Byre Opera, by youth theatre, all of the community groups which are not connected to the university, and all the different groups as well as Equity, Creative Scotland, various external businesses, all of the community groups. So we have the forum in which this will be very, very carefully looked at.
I think that's making the assumption that the Byre community and the Barron community are the same, which might not necessarily be the case. So it might be worth looking into publishing through the St Andrews magazine, something like that.
Yep, absolutely. I think judging from the community members who've written to me, there is a very substantial overlap. Yeah.
And then my final statement is that I just want to make you aware that for an extended period of time, the student ambassadors have been including the Barron Theatre on their student tours to potential students. And I know that there are some legal impacts of what we promise to prospective students. So you might just need to look into how quickly these changes are able to take place in terms of when the last cohort of students would have been promised a completely independent theatre with independent key holders and the variety of spaces that exist today, and what the legal implications of that might be. I have no idea, but that might be something just to look into.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Spencer. Moving on, Ollie, I know you've been quite active in the chat as well, but you've had your hand up for a while. Would you like to ask anything?
Hi, yes, thanks so much for chucking it over to me. Just popping my hand down. Yeah, so I just want to say firstly, obviously, thank you for your time. This is a really emotional decision, and we appreciate that you are aware just how important this is to a lot of people. And just, shout out to Kelly and Jess. I think everyone, to be clear, is saying very clearly that we are incredibly appreciative of the luxury that is the Byre. And there are, I think, a lot of questions about why put this extra pressure on them, but that's kind of not what I'm driving at here. To try and keep it as brief as possible, narratively, you've painted, and when I say you, I mean, in being presented this idea, you've painted this story of a 5-year plan for the university, right? This like strategic operational decision for the university. And that's what you've been going back to when we've been driving on about the motivation behind these questions. And you haven't really in that spoken about student drama and the external student activities outside of drama in that plan. And as a group of people who, what we do is we tell stories and we relate to stories where you're talking to people who, do a lot of drama and partake in a lot of drama. You're telling us a story that we're not a part of. And that really doesn't feel great to a lot of people. And so when we're told that all the details are being considered, and it seems quite clear from our perspective, and I'm really sorry if I'm misrepresenting anyone's opinion here when I use the word we, but it seems quite clear, at least to me, that from our perspective, we're a nuisance to be dealt with rather than a group of people to be respected, to be listened to be negotiated with, to be involved in this decision. And I just want to say unequivocally that most of all, that really hurts. It really hurts a lot of people. The question that I have is, are you open to considering alternative arrangements, assuming that, okay, fine, this is a foregone conclusion, there's nothing that can be done, we weren't consulted, the Barron is to be closed. We have immense respect for the buyer and all the knowledge that is there, but as has been pointed out on a number of occasions, it's a different space. Are you open to considering alternative arrangements? Are you open to looking into finding an alternative space, a space that we can call our own, a space that we can operate independently? Or is this just you telling us what the situation is going to be and that we have to swallow it?
I worked very, very hard to act in your interests and to provide something which is meaningful to you going forward. That includes battling with Fife Council to recognise students as members of the community. And what I mean that by battling, I have got lawyers involved to make sure that Fife Council will recognise when they put constraints on the way that we operate in the performing arts, that they recognise students as a legitimate group within that. And that maybe I expressed that badly, and maybe I haven't explained to you that what we have been doing is entirely driven by your interests. And Callie and Jess can attest to this. Every time they have sent me a draft of a strategic plan, we have inserted students into everything. What about students? So the suggestion that we don't think about you and that we're not acting in everything that we do because of you, I think is just a misrepresentation of and hasn't been expressed very well by me. And for that, I apologise, because everything we do is for you, and that is implicit.
Absolutely, 100%. All I'm trying to put across here is, in what I said, can you understand how it feels to us in this instance that we haven't, that this hasn't been necessarily the driving force, and in the narrative that's been put across to us, that it potentially feels like we've been left out from that. That's all that point is.
Yeah, of course. I don't agree that student voices have been left out. I think we have been consulting students, and I think we have been negotiating, more importantly, negotiating with students on what is a very difficult business decision for the university. But it is a business decision which is situated within a much wider strategic context. And I have been acting throughout this and with the Student Society and on behalf of the university to try to make sure that the best possible outcome is met for you. And that includes potential outcomes that might have been in 3 years' time when you were mid-semester, mid-program, the university needed the building back for a capital project. And
absolutely.
That would have been more disruptive to you. So this is driven by your needs, as far as I'm concerned.
Sure. It absolutely may have been more disruptive to us in some way. But I think something that is really clearly coming across here is that what we crave and what we're looking for. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, my internet just froze up there. What we crave and what we're still looking for is that sense of independence. And I wonder, this is an amazingly generous offer from the buyer, and we will feel so fantastically respected and, cared for to have been given that offer. But I wonder, is there an opportunity to have some sort of discussion about, okay, maybe that isn't exactly what students want and what students need. Is there an opportunity to have a discussion to try and find an alternative solution that isn't the Barron, and we accept that it isn't the Barron, but it also potentially isn't the buyer? We're immensely grateful for that offer, but I think what's being trying to be put across is that potentially that isn't the best solution to this problem. Is there scope to have discussion there, to find a compromise and to find an alternative answer that might make students feel more happy and more involved in that decision-making process?
Yeah, I can assure you that we know our estate and we know what there is. If the solution for you is that you want to go off estate and take matters into your own hands and find somewhere else, then that's entirely up to you. And we wouldn't object to that if that's what you felt was appropriate. But in terms of what the university can supply at the current moment, it's that.
And in that instance, is there potentially a discussion to be had about the way the Barron Fund can be used to facilitate that as something that had been
well, the Barron Fund is constrained by being for drama, development of practical drama at the university. So that, yes, it wouldn't be available if you went off-site, but it also isn't enough to do it's not enough money to build you a new theatre. It's not enough money to convert a theatre into, or a separate building into an appropriate theatre.
I would challenge. I think you might be surprised. You know, we are a very ingenious bunch, and
yes, but it would need to be done through a proper process.
Of course, yeah,
and,
of course.
And and at the moment, construction costs are increasing because of Brexit and because of supply chains and so on. So it isn't enough money. It isn't. It just isn't.
Okay, well, respectfully, I wonder if
it's barely enough for architects' fees. Frankly, it's just not. It's not.
Respectfully, I wonder if it might be. We might find a way to make it enough to consider all of these things that you put across. Maybe not building a new venue, but converting somewhere that already exists.
Yeah,
I would just
listen. If that's something that you want to talk about, then I can have a meeting with you to talk about the practical process of how one proposes new build or conversion at the university, what that process is, how the prioritization of that works. We have got a capital plan. It would need to be put into a capital plan, and it wouldn't be immediate. So I'd still be recommending that you would think about
as a stopgap. Yeah.
Yeah,
potentially.
Construction, if from concept to delivery, could be anything up to 5 years, but that would also then need to be prioritized within what the university is going to allocate its resources to. And
Absolutely.
We have a substantial, and that includes estates resources, project managers, all the people who would be involved in designers, all the people who'd be involved in the initial setup costs.
Absolutely. And that's something I think, I hope I speak for a lot of people when I say that's something we'd be really excited to potentially be involved in. And
so let me put it in context for you. I'll just put it in context for you to give you a sense of the scale of what you propose there might cost. I can't even envisage it, but to give you a sense of scale, you haven't seen it yet, but for those who know the Wardlaw Museum, which used to be called the Musa on the Scores, an extension has been put onto that building, which takes it into the back of the Garden of Philosophy. That project, which has added a very large room, but it is nonetheless a room, but probably the size at which you would be thinking appropriate, cost £2.1 million.
Okay.
So that gives you the sense of scale.
As just with complete respect, but as an alternative point, with a group of St Andrews students in December of 2019, I built a theatre for less than £1,000 that was certified by the City of Edinburgh. So I think that there might be potentially, all I'm suggesting is, with that kind of ingenuity and with that kind of knowledge and intelligence, there might be some sort of solution that isn't quite at that £2.1 million level, but that could still, pass all the checks and be as safe and as up to standards as it possibly, needs to be.
So as I've said, I'm very happy to talk you through the process if that's a route you want to go down. We can talk about that. I can't guarantee that it would be prioritised. It would go to all of a whole host of different university committees who would think about where that fits in terms of the capital plan's prioritisation. And I should set it in the context of we have major works ahead at Madras College, which is going to be the priority project, major refurbishment of the library, which I'm sure when all of you are thinking about your studies, the library is the biggest place that you would want us to spend money. Major refurbishment of the library, which is planned next. The costs are currently sitting at about a $5 million spend on that planned, and potentially more as well, plus the Butts Wind refurbishment, which is going to add flexible spaces, Creative Commons, Learning Commons, sorry, not Creative Commons, Learning Commons, but also disabled access spaces, spaces for students who are not in town and need to come and microwave things or work in the evenings, 24-hour access, accessible computers and so on. So that's where the priority of investment is. And that's why the buyer is, as a purpose-built theatre, is the right solution.
Currently,
Yeah,
absolutely.
currently,
And
currently,
I think it would be very meaningful. All of these things undoubtedly are incredibly important, and I think all students would agree that they are incredibly important things. It would be incredibly meaningful to know that student theatre and student arts slot into that list of priorities that you've outlined as things that are incredibly important to the university. And I would call on the student representatives and the SABs to consider what's just been said as an alternative option, as an alternative step forward, accepting that perhaps the Barron Theatre can't be the home of student theatre in St Andrews, but also acknowledging the amazing resource that is the Buyer and allowing that to continue as it is, and seeing if there is that third option. Thank you for your time, and yeah, I'll cede the floor to whoever else would like to.
Thanks very much. I think the Student Association would support students who want to have plans for how to do this. Obviously, they would take time, and I think at the moment, certainly my priority seems to be working with the Buyer and working out the best way forward with it, based on the assumption that the Barron is closing. I think it'd be good to move on. So, Ellie.
Hi, thanks, Gavin. So I'm Ellie. I'm the head of programming on the Barron subcommittee at the moment. But before I started my doctorate, I worked for 2 years in both university and theatre administration. So I have a lot of sympathy for what is going on here, not just for the very valid concerns coming from the student body, but also Dr. Stevenson's position sitting here past 6 p.m. on a Friday evening. So just, I've lost my notes because I've been sitting here a while. What I kind of want to ask is, I mean, I think we can agree that the students, including the Barron subcommittee and representatives from all of the affiliate societies that use the Barron, haven't been consulted when they ideally should have been, and that this process has been slightly topsy-turvy in the sense that the news has got out before that consultation could happen. And I think we could go round in circles all night about whose fault that is or what order that's happened in, but ultimately we can only move forward from this open forum. So I think maybe we should start talking about that. And what I wanted to ask is there a scenario here whereby we enter that consultation period with the Barron subcommittee and with representatives from the affiliates and with some kind of admin system set up so that other people in the student body and alumni can contact and raise concerns, so they're funneled through that working group, basically. So is there a scenario where we enter that kind of structured consultation period, we draw up plans with the Buyer for what a residency might look like, we iron out all of these details and difficulties that everyone has brought up tonight to do with space, to do with time. I can actually speak to a few of those based on the theatre I used to work at, but I'm not going to do that now because I don't want to take up too much time. But if we draw up those plans as a working group, is there a scenario whereby we can then put those plans to everybody, as in the student body, and see if those are viable? And if they're still not viable, if everyone is still not happy and they still don't meet the needs that the Barron currently does, then is there space to talk about alternatives? Or is it the case that this is a fully no appeals process? I haven't worded that very well.
No, I understand what you're saying. So the decision, as I've said many times now, the decision has been taken to not reopen the Barron as a theatre.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm asking is, after that consultation period, is there potential? And if the answer is no, the answer is no.
No, but what I was going to say is the period where you're feeding into conversations about how to make the Buyer work best for you, if there are areas that are identified through that the Buyer can't deliver in its current format, then we will still take that information and work towards solutions for you. So I think that's really important to underline. It's that whatever happens next, and a lot of that is up in the air and unknown because of the context in which we're currently living, but also what are the restrictions going to be, all of that. We just don't know. But whatever 2021 to 22 looks like, we will learn from that, whether it's with or without coronavirus restrictions. And if you need more, you need something different, then we will adjust our course and we will look at what works for you.
That's really reassuring to hear. And I just wanted to raise the possibility because I think it's been drawn as quite a black and white issue of it's either the Barron or the Buyer, and But obviously this consultation hasn't happened, and things happen in consultation periods that none of us can predict sitting here tonight. And it is a shame that it's been released as a firm decision via whatever channels before that consultation's happened, but that's the situation we're in, and I think we should probably start looking forward to moving on to that consultation period. I think that's all I have to say, unless anyone does want me to talk to the ideas I have about key holding and training, but I'm very happy to move that conversation to the actual consultation meetings.
I would say key holding and training are the nuts and bolts negotiations that are yet to take place and are appropriate in a smaller group.
I'm very happy to not throw that out to 100 people right now.
Yeah, I think I'd agree that there's a lot more to still be discussed, and as we've been trying to, we're trying to get student input, and there's a lot of student input that can feed into this. I know there's still people that want to ask questions, but it has been almost 2.5 hours now, so I think it would be an appropriate time to wrap this up. If you do still have questions that you want to ask, you can always email us and the SABs as part of the consultation, and we'll do our best to represent you. I don't know if KT and Bio Directors, are you available to be emailed as well? Or
yes, absolutely, absolutely. On this or any matter.
Yeah, so we will also this has been recorded, so we'll share this and go through the chat and try and like highlight any questions that have been asked but not answered and forward those towards the relevant parties as well. So thanks very much for everyone that has spoken and has typed and has been here for all this time. We'll put something up on, I think, the Mermaids Facebook page just as a kind of highlight of what you can do next and what's going to be happening next. But I think it's probably, that's about it for today, I'd say. But also, keep feeding in your opinions to us and the university, because we'd love to keep representing you. So yeah, thanks to everyone that's come along. Thanks to Katie and Callie and Jess.
Thank you. Thanks, Gavin. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Gavin.
All right. Cheers, everyone.